right, everybody, welcome back to the Pierce Dispatch. I am here with Lieutenant Jason Fejer from Albuquerque Fire Rescue. Thank you for joining
Thank
me.
you for having me.
So, why don't you go ahead and tell me about Albuquerque Fire Rescue? Tell me about your department, your fleet.
So yeah, Albuquerque, New Mexico. We're a Demetro department. We run 22 stations. We run 22 engines, 8 ladder companies. We have 3 squads. 2 are hazmat. One's a heavy technical rescue squad, and then we run 23 transport capable rescue units.
Sure. And can you tell me more about your role on the department?
So I'm currently serving as a public information officer. I've been in the department about 18 years. Came off the truck before that. I was at Engine 5. Was my last assignment before coming here. It's the busiest truck in Albuquerque. So it's been hard being off of a truck, but the opportunities I've had being the PIO have been amazing too. So we're out here doing a final inspection for a ladder truck, getting to do something like a podcast. I never thought that I'd be doing anything like this. So it's been a fun role. It's been challenging. It's different than what we face being on an actual responding apparatus, but it's been fun. I'm enjoying it, but probably another 8 months or maybe the end of this year, I'm gonna go back to a truck.
Well, that's exciting to hear. So, going from on a truck company to a PIO, what are you most excited about getting back to a truck?
I miss the calls. It's great. I have the opportunity. The fire chief has given me a pretty long leash, so I respond to just about everything I can. So I still have that role and I'm on scene, and I just miss the work. And so sometimes I get there and I get to cover it, and I'm trying to tell the story of the department and really highlight the work that these crews are doing. But sometimes I just miss doing the work.
Absolutely. So, you guys are here picking up a Velocity 105 aerial ladder. What made you guys choose the 105?
So the 105 HD is actually it's the workhorse of our aerial fleet. We still have a 2001 105 HD that's in service. So that's currently running out of Station 1. So we've had really good success with it, and the point that we're at in this spec now is we're just dialing things in. I mean, they're true trucks, so we don't run water pumps on any of our aerials. It's a pretty simple spec, tried and true. And this is the 5th Velocity we've picked up in about 5 years. So we've done 3 105 HDs. This one's going to be going to ladder 17. We also did ladder 13 and ladder 21, which are 100-foot rear mount platforms. So yeah, 5 new apparatus. We have a couple more trucks ordered. So that'll be 7 of our 8 aerials that we've essentially replaced in, the past 5. By the time we get those, will be about 7 years.
Sure. So I'm assuming this is part of a bigger fleet replacement plan if you're replacing all of your aerials then. So what are some of the top features that went in when you were deciding, okay, we're getting a mass amount of aerials here. We really need to be strategic about our options and our features. I'm assuming they're all matching and they're consistent and standardized. What were some of those features that you guys wanted?
So we're an all Cummins fleet. So we stayed with the X15 on all the aerials. We actually might be going back to the X15 on some of the pumpers. We're ordering multiple pumpers as well. We took delivery of 3 Pearson Forcer pumpers this spring. 2 more will probably be back here this summer to pick up, and then 3 more on the books after that. So we're all Cummins. So we stayed with the X15. The Velocity chassis is something that we're using on all the aerials. The pumpers we switch over to the Enforcer. So we'll see with the 105 if we end up switching over to an Ascendant and the Enforcer. But yeah, right now, to keep things consistent, we're sticking with the Velocity.
Sure, absolutely. And what changes would come with adding an Ascendant versus being consistent with the 105?
It wouldn't be a big change for us, be 107 versus 105. And the 105 is just what we're used to. Like I said, we still have that truck from 2001 in service. So the other thing that's been great about replacing the truck. So when I got in, it was I came in 07, and we had replaced almost the entire fleet between 04 and 07. So now when all those trucks started hitting, it's been a challenge for the fleet division and for us on the spec committee to try to keep up with that. So now we're trying to phase it in a little bit quicker, but also spread them out so that all the trucks aren't hitting at one time. So it should be good, like I said, to have all of our air replaced, the whole fleet essentially, and pumpers. We have so many on the books that this is going to put us back all the way to a pumper that's in service at 17s also that's a 2017. So we're trying to get pumpers out at, about 10 years, and we're seeing about 15 years out of these aerials before we pull them out and put them in the reserve fleet.
Sure. And well, they're just so busy. It sounds like your department. Do you know your call volume every year?
Yeah, we do about 100,000 calls a year. Our busiest engine company does about 6,000 runs. Busiest truck company is about 3,000 runs. The Ladder 17 is going to an area that it's not our busiest truck company, but they have a very large district, which isn't typical. So Albuquerque's kind of divided up east side and west side. Some of the districts on the east side are much busier and they're much smaller. As you get across the river to the west side, those districts kind of open up a little bit, and 17s has a lot of coverage areas. So they'll put this truck to work. They don't have necessarily the number of runs, but they rack up the miles out there.
Sure. And we just did an episode with Ricky Riley, and he's from Prince George's County. And we talked about fleet management. And you had brought up the role that your fleet managers played when you were planning out this fleet replacement. Do you have any tips or notable strategies they brought up that helped this order?
Well, I mean, it's like anything in the department, it takes investment, right? And so when I got in there, the fleet services division was running out of a very small garage downtown. They couldn't even really put an aerial up without putting it up and over and barely tilting the cab. And so in the past, I think they got into the new building in 2018. So they have pull through bays. I mean, it's just a modern garage, and we have the number of techs that can actually keep up with the maintenance and service of these trucks. So I think just having the numbers of people that can keep up with a department that runs 100,000 calls a year, you got to commit to that. So the fleet service division's been great. Randy Bloomer's our fleet manager. He's in charge of the whole kind of operation. He's super engaged with the truck building, being part of the spec committee. He's at every one of the meetings we have. So he kind of drives a lot of that too. And you'd mentioned earlier the standardization of things. And so, staying consistent with we're set up to fleet and to service Cummins. So, he's been kind of driving some of that stuff. And then he leaves the other part of the build to us on the committee. So it's been a good relationship. So probably, I think the biggest tip that I would have is you have to have that collaborative relationship between the people that are working on the trucks, and actually fixing them, and then the people that are working on the trucks responding in them. So, if you can put those two things together, it ends up being a good product for the people that ride around on them.
Absolutely. Having that communication is really important, it sounds like. So, when you joined the department, you had said they just replaced their fleet, you had new apparatus. So, you're coming around full cycle now. So, are there any changes in trends or any features that have changed from that order to this order that you see?
Yeah, so since 2019, we're all clean cab. That's probably, one of the biggest changes that we've seen. And that's got its own set of challenges that comes with it, especially on engines. We're running out of room for where we put things. So on a ladder truck, it's much easier. So the clean cab is probably the most difficult, transition that we saw. But now, we've done that for the past 6 years. It's just normal. So a lot of the newer guys coming in, it's all they've known. And unless they change technology and the materials that they're using on SCBAs, I don't really see them going back into the truck. We did have a really high instance of cancer a few years ago, which was that one of the driving factors that kind of spurred that change. And so hopefully some of those little things that we do can help just reduce the level of exposures. And we have seen a reduction in cancer numbers. I can't say that that's because of that, but I think us just as a department in the fire service in general, being aware of some of these things that we're exposed to. So we do decon after fires. We took the SCBAs out of the cab. So hopefully some of those little things help. And also with the exhaust extractors that we're using in the stations, and just the setups of how we're building stations now has also improved. So hopefully all those things together, we start seeing a long-term reduction in some of those cancers that we were seeing.
Sure. It's great to hear that you guys are being proactive and doing what you can to set up the success of your firefighters before and after the calls.
Yeah, for sure.
It sounds like you talked about compartment space a little bit there. And without having the pumps making your ladders a quint, how are you using that compartment space? Are you mounting your tools or what are you doing with that open area?
So as I mentioned, they're all true trucks. So in a department that has 22, about to be 23 stations and 23 pumps, we have plenty of pumps available. Yeah. So for cost savings, weight reduction, the simplicity of the truck, we have eliminated the pumps on all of them. So that big pass-through storage that we gained by not having a pump and in a pump house there, that's where a pass-through storage is. So long tools, and that's where all the SCBAs are mounted along with their spares. So that's worked really well. And so, like I said, this is the fifth ladder we've done that on. And so the first generation of that, we did a really long slide out, it can be a full length slide out, and that posed its own set of issues. So now it splits. So it's only half the depth and it comes out of each side. So we've kind of evolved and we've gotten better at it. So yeah, looking at ladder 17, the setup is much better than ladder 5, which was the first one we built. So the truck, like I said, the spec is pretty dialed in. So now we just get to kind of, fix some of those things we saw that we could improve upon based on the first one.
Sure. Well, that's great to hear that you put a truck in service and then you were able to take notes. This is working for us. This could be improved. These are the areas that our firefighters need optimized. So, when you're finally getting this fire truck in service, Can you tell me about the calls it's going to be going to?
So it's a large district as far as Albuquerque goes. So Station 17, it's one of our hazmat stations. So we run engine, ladder, rescue, and a hazmat squad there as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we're about 100,000 calls a year, and we're split up just like most departments, about 20% of that being fire and 80% being medical. So the engine and rescue are primary out on all essentially BLS and ALS calls. When they're on a call, then the ladder's next out. So they'll back them up for all EMS runs in the district. And then ladders, they'll run out with an engine on fire alarms. It's a hazmat station. So everyone there's hazmat technicians as well. So that if they ask for the task force, ladder 17 is part of that. So it's pretty much whatever we can go on. We don't save ladders for just fire calls. So they run medicals too. We actually just pulled them off fire alarms. That's going to become an engine only call. But while they're out, so they'll start backing up the engines more. It's not being on that fire alarm run. And so I think ladder 17 ran about 1,700 calls last year. So it's not our busiest truck, but like I said, they cover a lot of area. And then so on the west side too, 22 stations and only 8 ladder companies that they're responding into other districts. So their bordering district, ladder 7 has a ladder there. And then there's 2 districts across, ladder 21, there's a ladder there. So they're pretty much the west side ladders. So if there's a working structure fire, we send 1 ladder on single story, single family dwellings. All other fire calls get 2 ladders. So they get their share of just about everything.
Sure, that's fun for the crew. I'm sure they get to have some diversity in what they're responding to and keep up those skills with each call. I wanted to ask, why do you guys have a ladder instead of a platform? What's the difference for you?
So we actually have 3 platforms in service right now. One's at ladder 13, one's at ladder 21. Those are both rear mount, velocity, 100 foot. And then we have a mid mount, an old 95-foot mid mount that's a 2005 that's in service at ladder 7. So that's part of some of the debate right now too, is where the new truck was going. And so Sevens was kind of hoping for it. Ladder 1 was hoping for it. And part of the fleet management, the decision was made to send it to ladder 17, and then it's going to kind of shuffle down. So the ladder that's currently at 17s is going to go to station 1. And so there was some decision making that went into putting that ladder at 1s. And then ladder 7, we're still trying to fight for some funds to put another mid mount or possibly a rear mount platform in service there. So they just do have great capabilities, 2,000 gallon per minute waterways versus a 15 on our sticks. So they have some advantages going up in a platform that's a little bit more comfortable. It's a good working platform. Defensive fires are great on. And so, I mean, a lot of the reason why we're not running a ton of them is because not all the stations are set up for them, and they're also really expensive. So staying with the 105, HD true truck, it's kind of everything's more expensive now, but at least it kind of, it keeps us on that lower end of the scale instead of putting another platform in service. We're still fighting for some funds for ladder 7. We're hoping to pull one out of the hat there and see what we can come up with. And another mid mount would be cool. That's what they have there now. That's a 2005. There's actually really interesting story about ladder 7. So that it's a mid mount, and they spec'd a mid mount to go to station 3. So that was kind of when our HTR program was taking off. So they ended up bringing a heavy rescue in there, and East Central, I mentioned station 5, that's where I was at. There was a big demand for calls up there. So they moved that ladder up to 5s. So it was ladder 3 originally, then it went to ladder 5, and being a mid mount and those old 2005s have a pretty significant tail swing on them. So it wasn't working out in the district, and we were banging stuff up. So not long after that, station 21 was a brand new station. That's another West Side station, a little bit slower, a bigger response area. So they moved it from ladder 5 all the way out to ladder 21. So that call volume is why we still are able to have that truck in service at ladder 7. So it's still a good truck, even being a 2005. It's got a lot of life left in it. Being a mid mount has a lot of capabilities, and it's working well there. So it would be nice to get another mid mount there someday, or to stay with consistency. Maybe we could build another 100-foot rear mount platform to match the other 2. And then we just have this kind of a platform that we can run as a reserve truck. So that's an interesting story behind why we have a mid mount and why that platform exists versus the rear mounts that we have everywhere else.
That's funny. As you're sharing it, it bounced from here, it bounced from here, but really finding where it belongs and where it's going to serve the best. That was smart.
Yep. So yeah, it's worked out well, but yeah, it's got an interesting story to how it started at ladder 3. and they spec the mid mount because the low bay openings there. So
Sure. So next, I just want to ask, so as a PIO, you're connecting with the community a lot between the department, and obviously having the connection between the department and the community is going to optimize everything. It's going to optimize recruitment, I'm sure, connections with engagement and getting funding, I'm sure. Can you tell me, to other PIOs out there, do you have any recommendations? Because I love Albuquerque's feed. I'm always looking at it in your videos and stuff like that. Do you have any suggestions as to PIOs, how they can connect and bridge that gap?
So yeah, if you follow the pages, I stepped into a role where a lot of these things were already in place, and I just got to kind of expand on them. And the fire chief trusts me enough to get this information out there. So my kind of approach to this is if we send out a significant alert, or if there's a significant fire, I try to make sure that there's a post for it. If I'm not on scene, I'll even go there after the fact and post something. That way, at least the media's aware of it, the public's aware of it, and it shows what we're doing as a department. If you follow the feed, I also try to post some of those events that aren't significant events, just to try to show that it's not just the fires that end up on the news. Or EMS has still been a tough one for me to cover, just with a lot of the patient protections and addresses and license plates and that kind of stuff. So I'm still kind of navigating that. But the fire side, I started getting a lot of questions from the media saying that, is Albuquerque burning? Is there more fires than ever? And actually, last year we had 320 working fires, or significant working fires, I should say. We have probably more like 500 actual working fires where we don't lay in a 5-inch or get a supply. It's just small room and contents handled pretty quickly by 1 or 2 engines in a ladder. But I think I made them much more aware, or I made it accessible or more available to the calls that we were running. So no, the answer is actually fire calls are actually down. They're just seeing more of them. So, and that was my idea coming into this too, is I just wanted to highlight the work that the crews were doing. So it's been fun. It's been challenging. And I think the biggest part about being in this role is just getting the information out there. Let people do with it whatever they want. We have the ability to do some pretty cool editing. And I actually just lost my driver, David Rettinger. He just retired. And so some of the really cool editing, that if you follow the page and scene, he's the one that does that. So I'm getting kind of more into like raw posts, almost like just B-roll is kind of how I'm approaching this now. I'm starting to try to get into more photography and raw photography, which always seems to do well. And let's face it, it's easier to archive pictures than it is video. So that's going to be my goal for this year as I'm getting out of this office, is to take more photos. They archive well and they do well on social media. That's another thing. Like, I try to post not every day, and sometimes I'll post multiple times a day. It just kind of depends on what's going on in the department. So you don't want to like force it. But if you got something to use, post it. And I don't follow algorithms. I don't look at the best times to post, or how often I'm supposed to. If I have something to post, I just put it up there. So that's almost a full-time job in and of itself. But I've found out a way to kind of make it work.
You're speaking my language. I'm trying not to nerd out too much for our audience. But yes, that is such a critical factor in today's world where we need to connect. People want to know what's going on. And when you're talking about just sharing what's going on when you get on scene, or even going there after the fact, they want to know. They're just curious. I mean, you have people driving by incident scenes and they are just turning their heads. It's the same on social. They wanna know what's going on. They wanna know what the department's doing, the work that the firefighters are doing.
Yeah, and another kind of cool byproduct of is it's there's a couple of like fire buffs around Albuquerque now that'll run, and I see them on some of these scenes, and some of them are young, some of them are old, and also trying to encourage what they do as well. Like, I'm not there I don't own the information. I'm just trying to document it the same way that they are. So I'll try to share their stuff, or if I see them on scene,
Mhm.
say hello, and if they get a good picture, I've done the top 10 photos of 2024. I did it in 2023 as well. And this will probably be my last year doing it, but it's also a good way. Like, I've gotten some good photos from the media and just from the general public. So try to kind of engage them that way and try to encourage them. Like, I would never want anyone to try to cover something, dangerous, or get in the fireman's way. But a lot of these things happen on public streets, and they can take the photos, and if I can share them, or I've even used some of their stuff that I couldn't make it to. So I'll put my information out and get permission to use their photos. And it makes my job a lot easier sometimes.
It's just the best when we get content out there from these fire buffs. They are amazing at tagging Pierce, and we see it, we like it, we love it. But of course, you just shared something really important, is not getting in the firefighter's way. Do you have any recommendations as a firefighter yourself for these fire buffs who are out there? Because they are on scene. They are right up in the business. So what is your statement to them?
So it's pretty easy on our end. If there's a working event, it generally just stay across the street, and everyone's usually pretty good about doing it. I've never had to run anybody off. No one ever wants to get in the way, and so at least in Albuquerque, I've seen some other feeds where, like you said, they're close. They're right up in there, and so we haven't had an issue with it in Albuquerque. But yeah, generally, if there's a hydrant or a supply line, just stay on the other side of it, and you're usually out of harm's way. So if we start getting into actually dangerous scenarios, or it's a larger event or a warehouse, then I'll usually try to stage everybody, and then I'll start bringing them in a little bit closer. I don't know if you saw the F-35 crash that we had last year. We had a fighter jet crash just off the flight line, and that's a big one. That was like, we had national coverage on that. But, so it's one of the, we had to stage everyone really far out, and then I brought them in a little bit closer. And then even going through the review, there was a lot of us that were probably closer than we should have been. So that's part of that thing, learning from those events. And, I probably would have staged them even farther next time if something like that happens again. But try to give them an opportunity to film some of this stuff too, and they can cover it. And so you set those boundaries, and usually try to take them up to where I can. And if sometimes you just can't do it, but I think everyone's pretty good about staying out of the way.
Yeah, sure. I think that was really good advice to set up the boundary, let them get what they want, but also not interfering with your work because your work is obviously top priority in that moment.
Yep, and I have to try to stay out of the way too. And so I'm lucky. Like I said, that the chief has given me a pretty long leash. I have essentially a battalion chief vehicle. I can respond. I don't generally go lights and sirens, but I can. I have an SCBA. I have all my turnout gear. And so, like an F-35 crash, people were wondering, why does a PIO have a SCBA and a mask? It's like, well, sometimes a crash like that happens, or I've been at some house fires where it's hard to breathe. So I had to get on air just to try to cover some of these incidents. So I got to stay safe too. I generally try to attach with the safety officer because it's still their scene. And I don't want to hinder that either. I don't want the chief to have to wonder, well, like, where's the PIO at? Or, why is he why is he on the backside without all of his gear on? So I try to dress appropriately and wear my PPE when it's necessary. But yeah, I have to remind myself sometimes too, like, hey, you're not assigned to that truck. So you don't need to be helping them stretch a line.
Yeah, well, and you used to be in that mentality. You used to be in that role and you're returning back to it. So it's hard, I'm sure. Well, is there anything I didn't hit on or maybe you wanted to share about?
I mean, we've had good luck with 5 velocities that we put in service since, 2020 was when we built ladder 5. We've got ladder 9. This will be ladder 17. Those are all 105 HD sticks. We did the 2 platforms. So it's been good. It's always good coming up here. We have a lot of pumpers on order. I don't know if you want to get into this at all, but we've had an interesting turnover with the fleet. So we were all Pierce in '05 all the way through '08 was the last 2. We actually had 2 Pierce velocities that were Series 60 Detroits. They were the first versions with some of the EPA requirements. We had to regen them a lot. Once we figured those trucks out, they were great trucks. Engine 5 still, that's part of the reserve fleet now, that 2008 Velocity. So in 2011, we switched over to a different manufacturer, and we stayed there with 3 ladders and multiple pumpers. So ran them for a while. Then we switched to a different manufacturer in 2019, and those were engines. And then in 2020, we moved back over to Pierce for all the aerials. That was a good recommendation. So that kind of started it. And then now we have multiple Pierce engines on order as well. So it's been kind of full circle, and we've looked at a bunch of different options, and we're back.
Absolutely. Well, we are so happy to have you back. And obviously, I am too. You guys are great to work with, and you guys always have a great fleet here. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate you speaking on the podcast. And we're doing a walk around later today. So can't wait to kick that off, and everybody can go and watch that too.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun. If we come back again, I'd love to sit down again.
Perfect. Let's do it.
All right.